Hello, friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in the Russian media. When the first strike becomes faith. Vladimir Solovyov's evening broadcasts have long ceased to be talk shows. They are the political liturgy of the new Russia, where a nuclear strike, a biblical metaphor, and a blow below the belt sound like parts of a single prayer for war. In recent episodes, the tone has become almost openly apocalyptic. Solovyov and his interlocutors speak not of strategy, but of the inevitability of a strike, of the right to strike first, of how the enemy must be paralyzed with fear. These words no longer convey politics, only an ideology of force that needs no justification. Sacred fight, Solovyov begins with an everyday metaphor, an argument, a fight, a self-defense technique. If the enemy is strangling you, you need to strike below the belt. This scene gives birth to a concept for Russia's foreign policy. A country being strangled is obliged to respond first. We'll probably have to strike first if we can't avoid a fight, the host says. This isn't a metaphor, but a direct intersection of political and physical violence. Then the conversation moves into overtly theological territory. Russia, the program's guest says, lived by the New Testament. It endured, it offered the other cheek. But now it's time to return to the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Solovyov adds the final chord, not peace but a sword. Thus, biblical language becomes a justification for a preemptive strike, and Christianity becomes a tool of mobilization. This rhetoric is important not only because it is aggressive, it creates an internal sense of the sanctity of violence. War ceases to be war. It becomes a rite of purification. From harshness to justification of cruelty, it's time. And the harsher, the better, Solovyov proclaims. Next comes Machiavelli's philosophy of evil. If you can't commit evil that paralyzes the enemy, be kind. For the Russian audience, this is presented as a guide to victory. Wars are not won by kindness. But the key here is not the military recommendation, but the moral justification for ruthlessness. Russia, by this logic, must once again become a country where evil is permissible, provided it is governmental, where force is the only morality and mercy is a sign of weakness. This ideology is not new. It dates back to the culture of the besieged fortress. But now it resonates in the context of nuclear talk, digital technology, and artificial intelligence. What was once part of historical myth is now becoming an argument for direct action. They won't get that. We're probably reaching a point where, if we can't avoid a fight, we'll have to, as Vladimir Putin said, strike first. Tell me, please, if, for example, a strike were to hit Poland, would Germany stand up for it? Never. If it were hit by Germany, are you implying that Poland is Europe's bastard? Well, I don't know. I know political scientists who are fighting for its defense. We're talking about NATO countries in general, but not Gishutam with its warehouses and so on. The Germans certainly won't stand up for the fields. So Zelensky was more of a background player, and the French won't stand up for the Germans, and Trump won't stand up for Europe as a whole either. Perhaps we need to rethink today and come to a conclusion. They're talking to us based on the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Digital conspiracy theory. The next act of this broadcast is an attempt to explain everything that's happening through technological paranoia. The program's guests talk about unverified data, about Trump's alleged decisions being made by artificial intelligence, about Palantir, and about secret algorithms that supposedly advise attacking Iran. Here, Russia suddenly emerges as the bearer of rationality. We have everything under control, while theirs is AI that directs the war. This creates an image of chaos in the West, controlled by machines, dependent on digital advisors. The meaning is simple. Where the West has lost its human element, Russia retains its soul. This narrative structure is repeated again and again. Moral superiority through technological backwardness, faith instead of logic, force instead of analysis. Enemies as a geography of consciousness. Then the enemies are distributed across the map. America is chaotic. Germany and France are cowardly. Poland is the egg of Europe, but the real enemy is Britain. The crown is our main enemy, the refrain blares from the screen. This image is woven into a web of accusations. The British are preparing a terrorist attack at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Britain wants to create a new Chernobyl. For domestic audiences, these stories require no proof. A sense of threat is sufficient. What's key here? Solovyov no longer simply justifies the Kremlin's policies. He creates a system of coordinates in which the world is divided into believers and infidels, the cruel and the weak, saviors and cowards. Thus, a new dogma is born, Russia as the last bastion of morality, surrounded by enemies and soulless robots. This rhetoric is important not because it threatens, it is dangerous because it is sincere. Russia, which no longer has anything to offer the world, no ideas, no alliances, offers the world only a blow. Not as an action, but as a meaning. Think, analyze, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled. This was the program Empire of Lies.